So we are starting with the first lecture of intermediate micro 1, and in this lecture I will be basically beginning with the unit number 1, which is consumer theory, and with a significant weightage. So in the first lecture already we have explained the syllabus part of it, what are the different chapters to be covered in consumer theory and the other unit. Your changes have been mentioned, so I will be starting first of all with the content part of it. Now when we start with the content in micro, the content that is a consumer theory, one part is basically we can say the basic concept like budget line, preference, utility, choice and demand. So first topic is basically we are going to take is preference and utility. We will take a budget constraint after that, because these two chapters are again important from question point of view. So write down preference and utility. Preference is chapter number 3, utility is chapter number 4 in all variant. So you are doing chapter number 3 as well as chapter number 4. Now the first concept is that there are 3 different form of the preferences. When we talk about the preference, so preference over different bundle. So if any specific bundle is given to you, like for example, if I ask about any specific bundle 4, 3 and 3, 5, so this could be the bundle of different commodities, like 4 apple and 3 banana, then it will be 3 apple and 5 banana. If it is rice and wheat, then this is rice and wheat. So when we compare two different bundles, it should be the same commodity with a different quantity. Now out of these two bundles, which bundle will be preferred? That will depend upon how you write utility function. So utility from good 1 and good 2 could be written as, it could be written as x1 into x2. In that case it will become 4 into 3. Utility of this bundle will be 12. Utility of this bundle will be 3 into 5, because you are following this function. 3 to 5, 15. So this bundle will be preferred. Now that is, this bundle, we can say this bundle gives more utility as compared to this bundle. So this is strictly preferred. This will be the strictly preferred concept. But if I write the term as a minimum of, function as a minimum of x1 comma x2, if I write a minimum of x1 comma x2, then minimum of 4 comma 3 will be 3. So utility will be 3 from this bundle, and minimum of 3 comma 5 is also 3. Utility from this bundle is also 3. It means consumer must be indifferent between these two bundles. तो पहले किस में वो strictly preferred होगा, तो किस में वो different होता है. Then function could be written as x1 plus x2. In that case, utility from 4 comma 3 will be 7. Utility from 3 comma 5 will be 8. So this one will be again strictly preferred. So there are different examples of the utility function. We will take a few in this section, like well behaved, order complement, perfect substitute, complex, linear, and so on. So first thing about the preference, that there are 3 different ways in which preference can be stated: strictly preferred, weakly preferred, and indifference. Write down that meaning of that term. That consumer preference can be stated in 3 different forms. It could be strictly preferred, or indifferent, or weakly preferred. So if a bundle is strictly preferred, like if I write a bundle x1 comma x2, another bundle y1 comma y2, so I am taking good 1 good 2. पहले commodity same चाहिए, only then you can compare. We can have preference of choice only when these two bundle must have same commodity, but उसकी quantity अलग है बस. तो अगर ये एप्पल बनाना है, ये एप्पल बनाना है, राइस स्वीट है तो ये भी राइस स्वीट होगा. So strictly preference, if x1 x2 is strictly preferred, then utility from x1 x2 must be greater as compared to utility from y1 y2. That means if in the utility function you substitute x1 x2, then it must give you a larger number as compared to substituting y1 y2 in the same utility function. So strictly preferred means utility from x1 x2 must be greater as compared to utility from y1 y2. If I say that it is indifferent, in case of indifferent, consumer must be indifferent between x1 x2 and y1 y2 only when utility from these two bundles must be same. That means if you substitute x1 x2 in the function and you substitute y1 y2 in the same function, then utility must come same. So if utility is same, then consumer is indifferent. And what is the meaning of weakly preferred? Weakly preferred say that x1 x2 y1 y2, it is either preferred or indifferent. Preferred and indifferent both. So naturally when you draw indifference, we will be getting the indifference curve. Consumer will be indifferent between different combination of x1 x2 y1 y2. ऐसे इस बंडल को मार्क कर लिया. It could be written as x1 x2. This could be written as y1 y2. But both are on the same indifference curve, therefore consumer is indifferent. If I say strictly preferred will be any bundle which is strictly to the right of it. I will explain why right of it. Right of वाली bundle होगी, that will be on the higher difference curve, which means higher utility होगी. So if a bundle is on the indifference curve and if any bundle is to the right of it, then any bundle to the right of the difference curve will be strictly preferred. And if I talk about the weakly preferred include indifference as well. So area to the right of it, including the curve. Curve के ऊपर point हो सकते हैं, उसके right side हो सकते हैं. That will be the weakly preferred. So preferences can be strictly, it could be indifference or it could be weakly preferred. So first one is that we can state our preference. Remember, we are studying the chapter preference and it is part of the micro. So we are explaining consumer, but we are explaining only one consumer preference. We are not comparing one consumer with another consumer here. So for one particular consumer preference can be stated and it could be strictly preferred or weakly preferred. So first point is basically that before explaining the concept of indifference, chapter के start में कुछ introductory parts given है. First was this. Second is what are the assumptions when we study the preference chapter. So the chapter itself is based upon some assumptions. So assumptions about preference. Assumptions about preference. One important assumption in the chapter that the preference must be complete. And what is the meaning of complete? Complete actually means that if we talk about a specific bundle x1 and x2 and compare it with y1 and y2, then these two bundles must be comparable. Only when it is comparable you can make a ranking. This is basically the ordinal preferences. So only when x1 x2 can be compared with y1 y2, then only we can have a ranking of preference. That is, I can say I prefer x1 x2 over y1 y2, or I may prefer y1 y2 over x1 y2, or I could be indifferent between x1 x2 and y1 y2. Only when these two are comparable. You cannot make a preference between taking one bundle as apple banana and another as rice and wheat. So when we talk about the comparison, completeness actually means that the preferences must be such that you can make a ranking. There must be a choice. Suppose if I say make a choice or make a ranking of all students within the class according to the height and income. So height or income के according to the ranking नहीं. Because person may have more height, less income, lower income or more height. So there cannot be any preference. In that case, completeness assumption will not be satisfied. ऐसे कुछ क्वेश्चन चैप्टर के अंदर गिवन है. स्टेटमेंट होंगे और आपको बता दें कि उस स्टेटमेंट बताएंगे whether it satisfies completeness or not. Just remember me, completeness actually that this any bundle, any statement, any preference, any choice, you can have a ranking. If you can make a ranking according to that, then it satisfies completeness. If you cannot make a ranking, it will not satisfy the assumption of completeness. Clear? One important point is that you can, if you want to write the meaning of it, you can just write a line. We assume that any two bundles can be compared. We assume that any two bundles can be compared. Any two bundles can be compared. It means given any x bundle and y bundle, x bundle is y bundle is bundle combination of fruits. Given any x bundle and y bundle, we assume that x1 is to preferred over y1 y2, or y1 y2 preferred over x1 y2, or consumer is indifferent between x1 x2 and y1 y2. Consumer is indifferent between x1 x2 and y1 y2. That meaning of first assumption. Second is a transitive. This assumption is easy to understand. Transitive actually means transitivity that if x bundle is preferred to y and y bundle is preferred to z, then x bundle must be preferred to z. If A is taller than B, B is taller than C, then A must be taller than C. So the relation between two preference will be transferred to the third. So transitivity actually means this. You can state it in this form. If consumer is indifferent between x and y, he is indifferent between y and z, he must be indifferent between x and z. So that is the assumption of transitivity. Write one line. It means that if consumer thinks that X is at least as good as Y, at least as good as means X could be greater or equal to Y. If X is at least as good as Y and Y is at least as good as Z, then X is at least as good as Z. X is at least as good as Z. Clear? And third assumption is reflexive. Third assumption is reflexive. Now, reflexive means that a bundle is at least as good as itself. Just write down that line. It means that a bundle is at least as good as itself. At least as good as itself. That is x1, x2 greater than equal to y1 by 2. At least as good as itself. रिफ्लेक्सिव assumption एक्सट्रीम केस में ये वायलेट हो सकते हैं. मतलब टू बंडल है, why we can say that same bundle can be preferred. So same bundle can be preferred sometimes when we say that suppose you are giving two equal amount of cold drink to two children, but एक को बड़े क्लास में दिया और एक को छोटे क्लास में दिया. क्वांटिटी ऑफ कोल्ड ड्रिंक सेम है बट प्रेफरेंस चेंज हो सकते हैं. तो वैसे एक्सट्रीम assumption को रूल आउट करने के लिए कह रहे हैं कि bundle is at least as good as itself. That is the meaning of reflexive. So based upon these three assumptions, we study the consumer choice or consumer preference. अब इससे related कुछ question, if you go in the book, some statements are basically given at the end of the chapter. Like consider a group of people A, B and C and the relation at least as tall as A is at least as tall as B. So is this relation transitive or is it complete? ट्रांजिटिव है या कंप्लीट? ट्रांजिटिव है वो बताना है और इज इट कंप्लीट वो बताना है. स्टेटमेंट गिवन है एट लीस्ट एज टॉल एज, एट लीस्ट एज टॉल एज. whether that statement is complete or reflexive, complete or transitive. So at least as tall as में statement क्या होगा? A is at least tall as B, B is at least as tall as C, then A is at least as tall as C. So transitivity is there. Or completeness means we can have a choice, we can have a ranking. So if you can have a ranking and you can compare, then it is basically satisfying that assumptions. तो अलग अलग एग्जाम्पल्स गिवन है. लाइक टेक द सेम ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल एंड कंसीडर द रिलेशन स्ट्रिक्टली टॉलर देन. स्टेटमेंट है स्ट्रिक्टली टॉलर देन. ए बी या सी में आपको अप्लाई करना है स्ट्रिक्टली टॉलर देन. तो स्ट्रिक्टली में मुझे पता है कि इट हैज टू बी ग्रेटर. इक्वल टू वाली इक्वल टू का साइन नहीं आना है. आप कह रहे हैं इज दिस रिलेशन ट्रांजिटिव, रिफ्लेक्सिव, कंप्लीट. ट्रांजिटिव, रिफ्लेक्सिव, कंप्लीट. So it is basically transitive, but it is not complete. Why not complete? Because two person may be of same height, but strictly word use हो रहा है, तो strictly में same height नहीं हो सकते. फिर अगर हम रैंकिंग करेंगे बट दो पर्सन का हाइट इक्वल हो सकता है. अगर इक्वल हो गया तो वो इंडिफरेंट हो जाता है. इंडिफरेंट हो गया तो स्ट्रिक्टली वर्ड यूज नहीं करना. फिर तो ऐसे कुछ क्वेश्चन को आपको अप्लाई करना है यहाँ पे. सम स्टेटमेंट विल बी गिवन टू यू व्हेन विल बी डिस्कसिंग द सेपरेट वेरियस स्टेटमेंट्स आर गिवन. एग्जामिनेशन के अंदर भी ऐसे क्वेश्चन है और रीडिंग के बैक में भी क्वेश्चन है. तो यू हैव टू अप्लाई दोस कंसेप्ट. क्लियर? तो सम स्टेटमेंट्स आर ऑलरेडी गिवन इन द रीडिंग इटसेल्फ. चैप्टर के एंड में देखिएगा वो रिव्यू क्वेश्चन के अंदर है. देन नाउ वी मूव टू द फर्स्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर्म ऑफ प्रेफरेंस. वी स्टार्ट विद द वेल बिहेव्ड. So there are different type of preferences, that is different type of utility function. Start with the first one, or you can just make a list of preferences here. You can say some examples of preferences or utility function. One, called as well behaved. This well behaved is written as utility from x1 x2 is equal to x1 into x2. Why it is called well behaved, what are the properties of this well behaved function, we will learn. Second, goods could be perfect substitute. So for perfect substitute, function will be written as ax1 plus bx2. When two goods are called perfect substitute, how to write down the utility function? What will be the property of this perfect substitute utility function? But commonly you write it in terms of ax1 plus bx2. A and B are positive numbers. थर्ड, ठीक है, मैं वो लिस्ट वो कर रहा हूँ जो वेरिएंट बुक मतलब रीडिंग में जो गिवन है, देन वी विल ऐड ऑन बिकॉज देयर आर मेनी यूटिलिटी फंक्शंस. Perfect complement. Utility for complement will be written as minimum of ax1 comma bx2. Minimum of ax1 comma bx2. Why it is written minimum? We will elaborate. Fourth, function could be of Cobb-Douglas. Then you write this function as x1 to the power c, x2 to the power d. Again, c and d are positive numbers. Fifth, function may be written as quasi-linear. Utility from x1 x2 is equal to quasi-linear means one is linear, other is non-linear. But what is the meaning of linear and what is the meaning of non-linear? We will elaborate, but function could be written in that case as log x1 plus x2, or it could be written as root x1 plus x2. ये 5 फॉर्म एक्चुअल में बुक के अंदर गिवन है, बट इट कुड बी अ कॉनकेव प्रेफरेंस. It could be a concave preference like it may be written as x1 square plus x2 square. x1 square plus x2 square. It could be a maximum function. Then utility will be written as maximum of ax1 comma bx2. आपको बेसिकली चैप्टर में क्या करना है, इस सारे यूटिलिटी फंक्शन की प्रॉपर्टी सीखनी है. व्हाट इज द यूनिकनेस अबाउट दैट यूटिलिटी फंक्शन एंड व्हाट विल बी द शेप ऑफ इंडिफरेंस कर्व इन दैट फंक्शन. तो फर्स्ट वी स्टार्ट विथ, देयर आर मेनी बट बुक के अंदर इनफैक्ट ये 5 गिवन स्टार्ट. आई हैव एडेड 2, वी विल ऐड मोर बिकॉज फंक्शन की मोनोटोनिक ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन पॉसिबल है. दैट मींस सेम फंक्शन कैन बी स्टेटेड इन डिफरेंट फॉर्म. So what is the meaning of this well behaved? Now we can start one by one and elaborate. So first is well behaved. Well behaved preference. So I said it is written as x1 into x2. अब इसके आगे अगर कोई नंबर लिखा जाए that number will measure the utility. That means utility is 100. So there can be different combination of x1 and x2 जिसका प्रोडक्ट 100 हो सकता है. So numbers could be 5 unit of x1 and 20 unit of x2. So it will be 5 into 20 100. It could be 10 each. So 10 into 10 100. It could be 5 unit of good 1 and 20 unit of good 1 and 5 unit of good 2. That also gives a utility of 100. That means all these combination provide same level of utility. So if you connect all those points, then we get an indifference curve. So what does an indifference curve represent? An indifference curve shows different combination of goods providing same level of satisfaction. You can just write down that definition. An indifference curve shows different combination of goods that provides same level of satisfaction. So along an indifference curve, utility will remain same. Now why it has been drawn convex, why not a straight line, when it will can be straight line, when it can be concave, वो आपको पढ़ना है. So first is that if it is well behaved, then the shape will be negative slope and convex. So now we are going to explain why it is negatively sloped and why it is convex to origin. So what are the properties of this well behaved utility function? First property, that indifference curve is negatively sloped. Indifference curve is negatively sloped. It is negatively sloped. Now we have to give the reason why it is negatively sloped. And can indifference curve be positive? Yes, it can. It can be positive also. So when we explain that indifference curve is negatively sloped, it is negatively sloped due to the assumption of monotonicity. It is negatively sloped due to assumption of monotonicity. And what is the meaning of that term? Monotonicity actually means that more is preferred. And why more is preferred? More is preferred because marginal utility is positive. So if marginal utility is positive, then only I will prefer more of it. If from any commodity I get a negative marginal utility, then I will prefer less of it. Because negative marginal utility means your total utility will decrease, and positive means your total utility is increasing. So monotonicity actually implies that marginal utility of commodity is positive, or simply say it is more is better or more is preferred. That means if you continue to consume more and more of good one, then initially what happens, that as you consume more and more of good one, marginal utility will decrease, but it is positive. You stop basically at particular point. The question is why you stop here. We stop here because we are following the assumption of marginal utility positive. After that, the marginal utility will become negative. When the marginal utility will become negative, then indifference curve will become positively sloped. So indifference curve is negatively sloped due to assumption of monotonicity, which means more is preferred. Like we prefer more of apple, more of banana, but obviously there will be a limit of it. Marginal law of diminishing marginal utility states that as we consume more, the marginal utility of that good will decrease. So it will become zero at particular point, and then it will become negative. So naturally, if the utility is negative, marginal utility is negative, as a rational consumer, I will not buy it. I will not purchase it. So we assume that marginal utility is positive, and based upon that we can say that indifference curve is negatively sloped. I can use this property to elaborate this part, although it will come later on as well. Generally the indifference curve is a concentric circles. They are basically concentric circles. And when you write here good 1 and good 2, up to this we consider that marginal utility of good 1 is positive. For this also we consider marginal utility of good as positive. जब तक पॉजिटिव वाले पार्ट को आप हाईलाइट करो, we consider only this part. We are actually studying only this negative slope part of it. But if you go beyond it, then marginal utility of good 1 will become negative. So if it is negative, that means by consuming more of it, utility will decrease. So you need to compensate by having more of good 2 so that utility will remain same. Therefore, now indifference curve will be positive slope. So it will be positive slope in this area. We can say marginal utility of good 1 is negative and this is positive. इस particular point पे marginal utility is 0 and then marginal utility is negative. Similarly, at this point marginal utility is 0 and then it will be negative. So actually we can have 4 different shape here. This is one part where utility of both commodity is positive. Here utility of one is negative, other is positive. In this case utility of one is negative, other is positive. And in this utility of both will be negative. So in that case it will become concave to the origin. तो मोनोटोनिसिटी अजम्पशन का मतलब है मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी पॉजिटिव है। अगर कोई फंक्शन गिवन हो तो कैन बी चेक वेदर इट सेटिस्फाई द अजम्पशन ऑफ मोनोटोनिसिटी और नॉट। पेपर के अंदर ये क्वेश्चन होगा, गिवन एनी फंक्शन, you can find that question in the past year. Suppose if I write utility from x comma y is equal to 6x plus y square, कोई भी फंक्शन लिख दिया आपने, और अगर कह रहे हैं कि whether this utility function satisfy the assumption of monotonicity, so how to check it? monotonicity कंसेप्ट का मतलब है more is preferred, टेक्निकली इसका मतलब है मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी की वैल्यू पॉजिटिव है। तो कुछ नहीं करना, आपको सिंपली मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी ऑफ x कैलकुलेट करना है, which is differentiation of this function with respect to x keeping y constant, so that will be 6. That means it is a positive number, therefore monotonicity is satisfied for x. Marginal utility of y, that will be derivative of this function with respect to y, that will be 2y. Y quantity, it can't be negative, so again this number is positive, so monotonicity is satisfied for both. Clear? तो किसी फंक्शन के अंदर अगर आपको चेक करना मोनोटोनिसिटी है या नहीं है तो आप उसको ऐसे चेक करेंगे, जैसे इफ आई गिव यू सम एग्जांपल्स, लाइक ये पेपर के अंदर पास के क्वेश्चन में है, कंसीडर द यूटिलिटी फंक्शन 4x स्क्वायर प्लस 6y and examine whether assumption of more is better is satisfied for each good or not. More is better is monotonicity. So given this function, you can calculate marginal utility of x by differentiating this function with respect to x. So that will become 8x, which is positive number. Marginal utility of y, derivative of this function with respect to y, that will be 6, positive. So more is better is satisfied for both the quantities. 1 marker 2 marker कैसे क्वेश्चन होंगे, शॉर्ट क्वेश्चन है। तो जस्ट जो कंसेप्ट, इट इज रियली द क्वेश्चन विल बी दैट व्हाट आर द प्रॉपर्टीज ऑफ इंडिफरेंस का, वैसे क्वेश्चन यूजुअली नहीं पूछेंगे, ठीक है। वो पास से इंडिकेट कर रहा है कि दे आर नॉट आस्किंग दैट टाइप ऑफ क्वेश्चन थियोरेटिकल। कंसेप्ट को अप्लाई करना आना चाहिए कि अगर मैंने मोनोटोनिसिटी बोला है, मोर इज बेटर है, तो आप उसको किसी न्यूमेरिकल फंक्शन में कैसे चेक कर सकते हैं। तो मीनिंग इन शॉर्ट इज दैट मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी की वैल्यू पॉजिटिव होनी चाहिए, ओनली देन मोर इज प्रेफर्ड assumption is satisfied, which means monotonicity assumption is satisfied, and due to monotonicity indifference curve is negatively slope. Clear? That is our first part. Then second is, first assumption is monotonicity, indifference curve is negatively slope, first property. Second property is well behaved indifference curve is strictly convex to origin, strictly convex to origin. Now what is the meaning of strictly convex to origin? If I say that indifference curve is convex to origin, the shape is convex about towards origin. So why it is called strictly convex to origin? There are two regions in fact. Strictly convex to origin because A part, average is preferred over extreme. Average is preferred over extreme. Now what is the meaning of this term? Average is preferred over extreme की वजह से ये convex है। Average preferred over extreme का मतलब है utility from average bundle will be more as compared to extreme bundle. If I take one extreme bundle here, 20 and 5, another extreme here, 5 and 20, and I am following the function well behaved. We are learning the properties of well behaved. So what is the utility of these two extreme bundle? If you put one extreme bundle, 5 into 20, 100. If you put here 5 into 20, that will be 100. So utility from 5 comma 20 will be 100. Utility from 20 comma 5 will be again 100. Now what is the utility of average bundle? What is the average of these two bundle? इन दोनों का एवरेज अगर निकालेंगे मतलब 5 और 20 का एवरेज 12.5, 20 और 5 का एवरेज 12.5. So average commodity will be 12.5 comma 12.5. Now if you substitute these numbers in the same function, then utility will be 12.5 into 12.5, which is more than 100. So average bundle gives a higher utility as compared to the extreme bundle. So if you plot the average bundle, if you connect these two extreme and take the average of these two, which is 12.5 and 12.5, then that bundle will not be on the same indifference curve because that bundle gives higher utility. So it must be on a higher indifference curve. In that sense, we say average preferred over extreme. So one reason is that average preferred over extreme है, तो आप किसी दूसरे फंक्शन के अकॉर्डिंग इसको चेक कर सकते हैं स्ट्रिक्टली कॉन्वेक्स फंक्शन होगा या नहीं होगा. I will apply this. So first reason is that average is preferred over extreme, and the second reason is, that is B part, is a diminishing marginal rate of substitution, MRS. Diminishing MRS. Now what is the meaning of the term MRS? Marginal rate of substitution actually defined as quantity of good 2 that consumer is willing to give up in order to consume an additional unit of good 1 so that utility will remain same. I repeat, MRS is defined as the quantity of good 2 that consumer is willing to give up in order to consume an additional unit of good X or X1 so that utility will remain same. So numerically it is delta X2 by delta X1, and mathematically it can be written as delta X2 by delta X1 in that way. And whenever you do it, you basically get slope. What is slope of indifference curve? Slope of indifference curve is MRS. Slope of indifference curve is MRS. So if slope is declining, MRS is declining, and therefore it will be convex. If slope is constant at every point, it will be a straight line. If slope increases, then it will be concave. So you must know how to calculate MRS. So if I give the function utility from x1 x2 is equal to x1 into x2 ये function लिया है. If I equate with the 100, this becomes indifference curve equation. This indifference curve equation के accordingly we have plotted the indifference curve. Now from this function you can write x2 is equal to 100 by x1, और स्लोप निकालने के लिए क्या करना है, डेल्टा x2 by डेल्टा x1 to differentiate it with respect to x1, differentiate कर दिया, it will become minus 100 upon x1 square. That will be the slope. If I take this point A 5, 20, so what is slope at that point? Slope के लिए फॉर्मूला ये हो जाएगा, x1 की वैल्यू हो गई 5, so you will just put 5 here, 5 square 25, 100 by 25. Slope at point A will be minus 4. And what is slope at this point? B 20, 5, and difference curve utility is same. B point पे x1 हो जाएगा 20. So if you write here 20, it will become 20 square 400. 100 upon 400. Slope at this point is minus 1 by 4. So ignoring the negative sign, we can say that slope is declining. Since slope is declining, therefore it is convex to orient. अगर स्लोप किसी फंक्शन में हर पॉइंट पे सेम आ जाए, देन लाइन विल बी स्ट्रेट, और अगर स्लोप इंक्रीजिंग आ रही है, देन इट विल बी कॉन्केव. तो फॉर अ वेल बिहेव्ड फंक्शन इट इज कॉन्वेक्स टू ओरिजिन बिकॉज ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग एमआरएस एंड एवरेज प्रेफर्ड ओवर एक्सट्रीम. ये दो सिचुएशन है, दो कंडीशन है. एवरेज प्रेफर्ड ओवर एक्सट्रीम है एंड डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल रेट ऑफ सब्स्टिट्यूशन. तो एमआरएस निकालने के एक्चुअल में दो तरीके हैं. वन, if equation of indifference curve is given, then just write that equation in terms of x2 equal to what and differentiate it with respect to x1. The second way is you can calculate MRS by taking the ratio of marginal utility of good 1 and marginal utility of good 2. So apply this for the same function. It was written x1 into x2. So I calculate marginal utility of good 1 by differentiating the function with respect to x1 keeping x2 constant. x1 x2 का differentiation x1 के respect में holding x2 constant. So that will give you x2. Marginal utility of good 2 derivative of function with respect to x2 keeping x1 constant. Therefore x1. So MRS will be x2 upon x1. अब इस फॉर्मूले if you apply this for the same function x2 by x1 मैंने कहा स्लोप आ गया तो x2 4 है 20 है और ये 5 है 20 by 5 4 ठीक है सब साइन याद रखिए साइन नेगेटिव इसलिए आ रहा है बिकॉज वो नेगेटिवली स्लोप्ड है और यहाँ पे ये नंबर आ जाएगा 5 by 20 दैट विल बी 1 by 4 so whether you apply this or the other way the answer will be same. ठीक है तो किसी भी फंक्शन को कैलकुलेट करने का तरीका ये है जैसे जस्ट फॉर एग्जांपल if I write the function as x1 plus x2 कर दिया होता अगर x1 plus x2 हमने किया तो x1 के रेस्पेक्ट में अगर हम डिफरेंशिएट करें if you calculate marginal utility of good 1 differentiating with respect to x1 then it will be 1 and marginal utility of good 2 differentiating that function with respect to x2 that is also 1 therefore MRS is also 1 but MRS slope होता है slope हर पॉइंट का 1 है 1 का मतलब लाइन स्ट्रेट हो जाएगा फिर at a slope of 1 if you change the function the answer will be different. Clear? अब ये क्वेश्चन ये पार्ट भी क्वेश्चन में डिफरेंट केस में अप्लाइड है लाइक यूजुअली ये सारे क्वेश्चन आपको फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन के पार्ट में मिल जाते हैं जैसे एज ये क्वेश्चन में स्टेट कर रहा था एटलीस्ट एज टॉलर देन you'll find this question in the form of function given है और उसमें आपको ये चेक करना है कि वहाँ वो स्ट्रिक्टली कॉन्वेक्स है या नहीं है स्ट्रिक्टली कॉन्वेक्स के कंडीशन में if I can just recall that question correctly it was if I write function as x1 square plus x2 square और आप कह रहे हैं कि स्ट्रिक्टली कॉन्वेक्स है या नहीं है जो कंटेंट बता रखा कंसेप्ट वो ये है इफ एवरेज प्रेफर्ड और एक्सट्रीम तो कॉन्वेक्स होगा स्ट्रिक्टली कॉन्वेक्स सो जस्ट अप्लाई दैट so I take a bundle 0, 10 तो 0, 10 यहाँ substitute कर देंगे 10 square will become 100 utility will be 100 utility from 10, 0 that is also 100 take the average तो 10 और 0 का एवरेज 5 ये भी 5 5, का यूटिलिटी हो जाएगा 5 स्क्वायर प्लस 5 स्क्वायर तो इट विल बी 50 अब यूटिलिटी फ्रॉम एवरेज एंड यूटिलिटी फ्रॉम एक्सट्रीम मैंने कहा प्रेफरेंस स्ट्रिक्टली कॉन्वेक्स होने के लिए एवरेज की यूटिलिटी ग्रेटर आ रही है बट यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है एवरेज की यूटिलिटी कम है एक्सट्रीम की यूटिलिटी ग्रेटर है तो इट इज नॉट कॉन्वेक्स स्टेटमेंट आप लिख देंगे इस फॉर्म का एग्जांपल लेकर के दिस यूटिलिटी फंक्शन इज नॉट स्ट्रिक्टली कॉन्वेक्स टू द ओरिजिन क्लियर so we will be doing more of this type of question जो पेपर के अंदर आ रखा है in due course. So second feature is basically it is strictly convex to origin. Third property that indifference curve cannot intersect and it cannot intersect mainly because of the property of assumption of transitivity. That means if you draw one indifference curve we cannot draw indifference curve like this. This is basically a wrong diagram. Why it is wrong? Because if you take any point on intersection, suppose x, and you write y here and you take z here, so we can say that consumer is indifferent between x and y because they are on the same indifference curve. Consumer is indifferent between x and z also because they are on the same indifference curve. So if x and y में consumer indifferent है, x और z में indifferent है, then y and z must be on the same indifference curve, which is not the case. So if two indifference curve will cross, then assumption of transitivity will be violated. Therefore, indifference curve cannot intersect, cannot cross. And fourth feature is higher indifference curve represent higher utility or satisfaction. Higher indifference curve represent higher utility or satisfaction. That means if you draw one indifference curve and the other, then any point on the higher indifference curve gives you a higher level of utility. And the reason is again monotonicity. Suppose I take one bundle A, other bundle B. So on B bundle, quantity of x1 is more and more is preferred. That means if you have more of one without decreasing the other, then utility will be greater from that bundle. So higher indifference curve shows higher utility again due to assumption of monotonicity. So these are the four properties of the well-behaved indifference curve. Well-behaved indifference curve is characterized by higher indifference curve shows higher utility, cannot intersect, strictly convex to origin due to diminishing MRS and average preferred or extreme, and it is negatively slow. But again I repeat, क्वेश्चन डायरेक्टली वैसे नहीं होगा कि प्रॉपर्टीज बताने, जितने प्रॉपर्टीज लिखे उसको अप्लाई करने, कि मोनोटोनिसिटी चेक करना आना चाहिए, एवरेज प्रेफर्ड और एक्सट्रीम चेक करना आना चाहिए, एमआरएस कैलकुलेट करना आना चाहिए, देन ओनली यू कैन अप्लाई. तो दिस वाज योर फर्स्ट फंक्शन. तो जितने फंक्शन यहाँ पे लिखे गए सबकी प्रॉपर्टी आपको समझ में आनी चाहिए कि व्हेन गुड्स विल बी सब्स्टिट्यूट और परफेक्ट सब्स्टिट्यूट, व्हेन इट विल बी कॉम्प्लीमेंट, परफेक्ट कॉम्प्लीमेंट, बिकॉज समटाइम्स या तो फंक्शन गिवन होता है या फंक्शन मुझे क्रिएट करना है. वहां पे फंक्शन क्रिएट करना है, जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल इफ यू सी दिस क्वेश्चन, ऐसे क्वेश्चन आपको ज्यादा मिलेंगे कि आप कंज्यूमर स्पेंड्स ऑल हिज मनी ऑन कॉफी एंड शुगर, ही ओनली ड्रिंक्स कॉफी विद 2 स्पून ऑफ शुगर, ओनली ड्रिंक्स कॉफी विद 2 स्पून ऑफ शुगर, मतलब बोथ विल बी कंज्यूम्ड टुगेदर. दैट मींस इट इज अ परफेक्ट कॉम्प्लीमेंट केस. बट हाउ टू राइट द परफेक्ट कॉम्प्लीमेंट इक्वेशन and how to draw the indifference curve and then the demand function. The function you have to basically create there. It's not that sometimes it will be given, sometimes you have to create those functions. Like this, in a two commodity will specify the utility function when x1 x2 are perfect substitute with 1 unit of x1 equivalent to 3 unit of x2. तो अगर ये statement given है तो उस statement के accordingly utility function क्या होगा. First of all, you must know what is the meaning of the perfect substitute, how to write utility function for perfect substitute. Similarly, x1 x2 are complement, then how to write the utility function. तो ये start के जितने भी क्वेश्चन होंगे, फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन जनरली विल फाइंड इट फ्रॉम द बेसिक पार्ट, वो बेसिक वाले क्वेश्चन होते हैं. ठीक है, तो वी हैव डन बेसिकली ओनली द फर्स्ट फंक्शन व्हिच इज वेल बिहेव्ड. Subsequently in the next lecture we'll be doing with perfect substitute, complement, Cobb-Douglas and so on. Clear? So go by the reading. Reading के जो content है although आप क्लास में कर रहे हैं but still you have time, read that. रेफरेंस का मीनिंग क्या है, assumptions क्या है, रीडिंग के बैक में जो क्वेश्चन है वो करने हैं, वर्कबुक के बैक में जो क्वेश्चन, वर्कबुक में जो क्वेश्चन है वो करने हैं. although we'll be incorporating all, और जो पास्ट के क्वेश्चन है वो incorporating all in this class as well as the separate class, जिसमें only we'll be discussing the question part of it. Clear? आज के लिए यही तक रहेगा. विल कंटिन्यू विद दिस. थैंक यू.